Hello. Hello, people. Hello, friends. Hello, YouTube family that I'm building. Welcome back to my channel, The Loving Revolutionary. My name is Taya, and there are acorns falling out of the sky. Yay! So, today I want to talk about shadow work, shadow aspects, and a way which it has struck me very recently that kind of shook me quite deeply, which is vanity related, I suppose. But this is just kind of a general commentary on our shadows as humans and the beauty of them, and also, of course, the difficulty and resistance in seeing them for what they are, which is something people are genuinely a little bit afraid of. Also, I'm not naked. I am wearing a top. But I guess never mind, I'm not going to continue what I was going to say. Yeah. Let's get into it! Okay. So, recently, in fact 2 days ago, I started reading this book called Gene Keys, which is a perspective on DNA, basically, that states that a lot of our shadow work, or a lot of our personality and our aspects, actually lie in our DNA, which is personally something I believe in because that is an intuitive kind of idea that I already had a long time ago. For me, there's like 95% of our DNA, which scientists call junk DNA, but in my mind that doesn't even make sense at all. Everything in life has a purpose, and basically our DNA is just the story of existence. It is our blueprint for how we look, how we exist, what our cells do, etc. And the mind and our patterns that we have and how we live life are actually far more intertwined with our body than we think it is. And so I really resonated with this book because those were some ideas that I already believed in prior to reading it. And basically in this book they break down our certain shadow aspects or certain qualities of our DNA, and a lot of them are very big and actually relate to the base survival instincts of being human or being any other animal for that matter, which makes sense because survival is a part of living on Earth. Survival in terms of sexual reproduction and food, eating, all of these things we have to do to fill our basic needs in order to keep recreating human society, which has been the point for a while, just living in survival mode. According to this book, that is not all that humans have to be. Also, personally, something that I choose to believe in because I'm truly not interested in living in survival mode all the time. And I do believe that we have a choice to change our reality, but we have to decide to break free of our attachment to surviving and living in our base energy as humans. And truly this is something we do become attached to because it's what most people live in, it's what we're raised in, and it's hard to do something else. And weirdly, there's like resistance to being better or being at a higher frequency or like changing the way we exist because we like what is familiar to us, even if it keeps hurting us over and over and over again. So, and when I read this book, I really felt that too. Like there were a lot of points in there where I was just like, it was hitting me in the core of like what I think it is to be human. And I was realizing that, yeah, I do actually have a lot of resistance against losing a lot of the aspects that I don't really like about being human. but I'm still really scared to let them go because I don't know anything other than it. And this is like safety, and I'm used to the goodness that it brings. And if I lose it, I'm scared that I won't get that goodness anymore. So typical lack mindset, which is also super big part of survival mode. Yeah, so in every DNA gene sequence, or every gene, in this book, there is a shadow aspect, a gift aspect, and the seedy aspect. And the shadow aspect is the one they write about first, which is the negative side of it, which is usually the way that things tend to manifest in our reality here, because we are stuck in survival mode and we don't really feel comfortable expressing our truest, most joyous, most happy, most trusting version of ourselves. We often feel like we have to protect ourselves. We often feel like the world is negative, etc., which leads all of us to express our shadow side more often. And then we have the gift side, which is when you let go of the shadow and you move into the positive aspect of it. And then there is the seedy, which is like the truest, I guess you could say, like enlightened version of your gene, which seems to be quite far away from the reality we are experiencing now. And it seems like a lot of people will move into the gift phase, but the seedy won't arrive until much later or not much later, but that will be much harder to attain because it is such a different frequency from where we're at today. But yeah, it's cool to have all three of these versions to see how we can move towards the gift, which is already like a very beautiful way of expressing this, to the seedy, which will be its ultimate expression. And someone's coming, so I gotta move position. See you later. Okay, kind of hard finding a position or place to hang out, but here we are again, hanging out on the floor, just chillaxing. So yeah, back to shadow work and the gene keys. This lighting sucks. Let's get over here. I've never been like laying down while I film before, so this is a new experience. Regardless, if you are interested in looking into shadow work, I recommend you go onto the Gene Keys website, and they will, it's kind of like astrology. They'll make you put in your birthplace, date, time, and they will make a gene key chart for you, and it's kind of like an astrological chart, but not really. But it gives you these aspects that you have, and then you can just kind of click through it on the website to understand their basic meanings and the shadow aspect. There is also a book you can get which goes more into detail, but the website itself is a great place to start. And I mean, hopefully you kind of get this like strong reaction to it, because that's how you know it's like real. That's how you know if what you're reading resonates with you. If it makes you uncomfortable and you're like, I don't want to admit this part about myself, then yeah. And so when I saw this shadow aspect of mine, I'll give a brief overview of what I felt, or what I experienced come up for me. One of them was a big, it's called the 59th gene key, and it is about, it is an aspect for me that shows up in my romantic relationships, which is basically the base wound in men and women, like the division of the sexes. And that is that women tend to be afraid that men are going to leave because they need protection and they want their children to be protected. And men tend to feel like they want to be free because because they want to like spread their genes. And basically this is like the pull and the push, the pull and push, or like the 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 chasing and the like avoiding aspect, where one, yeah, basically you understand what I'm saying. It doesn't work. People are gonna hurt each other, and we see this a lot of times, often in a lot of relationships. And of course it's possible for women to be doing the more masculine and feeling afraid of commitment and feeling like they want freedom, especially now. That's a video I want to make later. I've definitely experienced being on both sides. And regardless, it sucks. And the shadow side of this quality is to be manipulative, to be dishonest, to hold things from your partner because you're afraid if you're honest, then basically you feel like you have to be dishonest in order to come out on top and avoid this shadow energy. But the ironic thing is that the dishonesty and such actually doesn't, ow! Ow! I had this in my rib. Oh, you can't really see what it is. But it freaking pricked me. Point is, the dishonesty hurts and it only makes the shadow energy bigger instead of actually dealing with the fear. And the way that they describe this is that basically this fear was necessary for where humans were at in their evolution. And that'll make sense because we've been living literally in survival mode for a long time, as I've been saying. But there's a huge shift coming, and it's already here. But Richard Rudd, which is the writer of this book, says that the way out of this shadow energy to stop being stuck in it is, and this goes for every shadow energy, is to recognize it and recognize when it is showing up in your life, if you feel like you resonate with it, and to identify which ways and with which people and what situations it shows up. And then to, specifically with this one, to be honest about it. If you're in a partnership with someone, and either from the man's side or the woman's side, you're getting this very deep ancestral wounding of, I'm afraid that you're gonna leave me, or I'm afraid that you're gonna take away my freedom. Understand that that's not just you. That's not just your wounding. That's not something you need to take personal. It's something that all of humanity is dealing with and has dealt with for frickin' centuries. And our wounds cause us to act out of alignment. It causes us to do crazy things. It causes us to do things that our higher being isn't aligned with. Like recently I made some decisions that were not the best, not the most aligned with who I am truly and who I want to be. But it is an aspect of my shadow side, and it's an aspect of me also. And if I just try to avoid that, and if I try to deny it, then it's going to keep coming up, because the shadow side doesn't want to hurt you. That's not its purpose, but it needs to be seen. It needs to be known. And the only way for it to be known is for it to show itself. So the only way to move through your shadow is to acknowledge it, to see it, to admit to it, to share about it with people that you love or people who it affects, and to be honest about it and to explain why, and to work through it on a personal level, but also to work through it on a community level or on a relationship level. Um, so yeah, I mean, that's what I've learned recently about the that the Gene Keys. Very interesting book. Really recommend it. Yeah, go check it out. With that being said, I think this will be the end of this little video. Quite cute, quite short. Yeah, just know that your shadow side definitely can feel scary, but the only way through it is through it. The only way out of it is through it. And also, side note, literally, when I read this, it like really shook me, and I was like, no, I'm fucked up, which is something that like I like to be in denial about sometimes, because all of our egos like the idea of us being good people. But the thing is, we are good people even with our shadows. It's part of being human, and it's not something we can escape as long as we're not possessed by our shadows. And honestly, we only get possessed by our shadows when we ignore them and we try to push them to the side, because that makes them grow stronger. And the more, yeah, and if we're actually in acceptance of them, we can see them for what they are, and we have more control over them. Whereas when we deny them, it's like we disassociate from part of ourselves. And when we're disassociated, we're in less control. So this other shadow acts out more. It has more power because our wholeness isn't working with it in balance. I hope that makes sense. And yeah, and so our shadow literally is something that everybody has. Everybody has different shadows. It's expressed in different variations. We're all unique in that way. But it is a core aspect of being human, and a core aspect of being human right now. And this is a time where we have the opportunity to really work through our shadows, because we're changing genetically, supposedly. We're changing into a new way of being. And so a lot of this really, really deep, like hard, instinctual, like base energy stuff has to come out. And this isn't just a walk in the park, you know? But the most terrifying part is honestly just admitting to the fact that we're just as crazy as everybody else. It doesn't matter what you look like. It doesn't matter how smart you are. It doesn't matter like how loving you are. It doesn't matter how positive your positive traits are and how much you sacrifice yourself. The fact is that you are just as evil, or just as egocentric, or just as selfish as everybody else. We all have these deep core wounds, and we have to see them, because the fact that we all share the deep core wounds actually brings humanity together. It's actually the healing that we need to exist together in a more loving world, because we have to we have to stop being afraid of each other, and we have to start having compassion for one another. And when we can see that even though we try to be better than other people, like that silent, tiny little voice inside of us that always says, oh, you're so good, like, you're so loving, you're different, or like, you know, whatever that little ego voice is telling you. It's okay, everybody has a freaking ego, but it's important to admit that oftentimes we unconsciously are trying to prove ourselves to be better than we truly are, because we're afraid of not being good enough. But everything in life is a freaking paradox. And fact is, you're simultaneously not good enough as you are good enough. It's like, I had this idea the other night where my dad traveled a lot when I was a kid. And you know, a lot of our core wounds come from when we're a child, because we have this idyllic idea of the world, but it doesn't quite match the reality of the world that we live in. So we get very hurt as children, and we start developing ideas about our self-worth that aren't true. But it's just because ideas but it's just because our brains aren't developed enough or mature enough to create ideas that are truly balanced with the world or truly balanced with ourselves. So this is the role of the adult, to reassess the ideas that were created when we were children and rebalance them. And the fact is that in the past they have been rebalanced in really tragic ways and really sad ways. But there's plenty of people, including me, who are here to rebalance it, and you, into a more positive light. And an example of this would be that when I was a kid, I developed an idea of not being good enough because my dad was away working all the time. And it created this wound of my father not caring enough to be around me, and or like even a bigger wound of manly energy, the caretaker energy, me not being good enough for the caretaker energy. But here's the thing, ironically, paradoxically, yes, I wasn't enough for the whole system of the world to change and for my father to not have to go out and make money anymore. I couldn't change that whole thing by who I was. But paradoxically, I was enough for my dad to love me and care about me and to go out into the world and make money because I was special and he did love me. And regardless of what wounding you have, there's always a way for you to look at both aspects of it. Even if your father wasn't around at all, and that wound is a lot deeper than mine was, there is always another side to it. And you just have to start exploring that and trusting in both aspects of like life. And both of these aspects are valid, both the negative and positive. But we're moving out of the negative. We're moving out of this past evolutionary way of being. You can choose to stay there if you want to. I'm sure a lot of people will. But there's also the opportunity to look at it in a more positive light and see this other aspect and move into that if that is what you wish. So yeah, just freaking go discover your shadow. It's intimidating, but again, it is so beautiful to know that we're literally all in this together, because none of us are free of the shadow. None of us are more worthy than anybody else, regardless of who you are, what you are. Even the people who never choose to improve in terms of like raising their frequency or never choose to change the way they believe or think, they're also equally as valuable. And people often get like things twisted when they're on a spiritual journey. They start thinking that they know better or that they're more loving or more compassionate, so for some reason they're worth more. And low-key, I have been guilty of this at a very quiet level that I was kind of trying to deny. But it's normal, and that's okay. We all literally have egos, and the ego is just acting out of woundings. And if we can just see that and accept it and know that, yeah, I am imperfect, but every other person is also imperfect. And literally, we're just in this freaking journey together. And the fact that we can be real with the fact that we have egos and we are imperfect and we are selfish sometimes and we act out of fear, that is going to help us break that cycle and actually connect to each other in a much more vulnerable and loving way, where we can just be honest about what it's like to be a human and the things we all struggle with, rather than trying to, you know, fit some kind of facade, because we think deep down enough that we are worse than everybody else. The only reason why we try to prove something about ourselves is because we're trying to prove some very deeply rooted idea that we are worth even less than other people, or we fit in even less than other people. And the goal is to know that that's not true, because it's not. Like, regardless of who you are and what you've been through, that's just not true. You are equally as beloved and equally as important and equally as gifted, even though it shows up in different ways, as literally anybody else in this world. Your value is not based off of other people's opinions or experiences or, you know, whatever. You are perfect as you are. And the more you can trust that within yourself, the more you will see it reflected in the world around you, the more you will be drawn into groups of people who will see your innate perfection and also your innate imperfection, and love both as perfect and needed and valid and valuable, because we literally cannot exist without our shadow, and our shadow is something that we need to accept in order to move into this new point of life and existence. So yeah, with that being said, this is the end of the video. I love you, I love your shadow, and I'm so excited for you to discover more of yourself and to show up as a more vulnerable and real version of you, and know that there will be people holding space for you and that are so excited to meet all of you. Okay, bye bye.